Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It is True Crime Tuesday yet again, and today we will be talking about a woman so evil and vile that she's actually considered as one of the most hated women in America. Today we will be talking about murderous monster mom Diane Downs. Elizabeth Diane Fredrickson was born on August 7, 1955 in Phoenix, Arizona. She lived with her parents and three younger siblings and was raised in a very strict and highly conservative household. Now, Diane was a fairly good kid growing up. However, once she started high school, she also began to rebel against her parents' wishes. And the way that she did so was by dating boys. And of course, as I've mentioned, this was a very strict and conservative household. So dating was a huge no-no. Around this time, she met and started dating a guy named Steve Downs. Now, these two dated up until Diane was in college, and they broke things off when Steve decided to join the Navy, while Diane attended the Pacific Coast Baptist Bible College, where she often got in trouble before finally getting expelled just a year later for promiscuous behavior. So, of course, this was Diane's nightmare, moving back in with her parents. However, Steve then came back from the Navy and the pair decided to elope in November 1973. And a year after their marriage, they welcomed their first daughter, Christy. 2 years later, in 1976, Steve and Diane welcomed their second daughter and named her Cheryl. Now, after having this second child, Steve then decides to finally have a vasectomy, thinking that he was already happy and contented with two kids. However, just a short while after he had gotten his procedure, Diane falls pregnant once again. Now, obviously, Diane had an affair, but she and Steve remained together after that, and she ultimately decided to have this third child aborted. However, as things were just started to go smoothly for this family, Diane falls pregnant once again in 1979, and this time she decided to push through with that pregnancy and had a baby boy who she named Danny. Now, Steve tried his best to stay for the sake of his girls. However, he ended up deciding to finally divorce Diane in 1980. At this point, Diane had no idea how to raise three kids on her own, so she decided to do what she thinks she does best: get pregnant. In 1982, she became a surrogate and birthed a baby girl named Jennifer, which she was paid $10,000 for. Things were finally starting to turn around for Diane and her three kids when a terrible incident happened on May 19th, 1983. Diane arrived in the hospital frantic, saying that her three kids had been shot. According to Diane's own version of events, she and the kids were on their way home, driving on a back road with the song Hungry Like the Wolf by Duran Duran playing in the background, when a bushy-haired man flagged them down. And she, for some reason, decided to stop for the stranger and got out of her car before asking him what was wrong. Now, this bushy-haired man allegedly says, "I want your car," before reaching out to shoot all three sleeping children. Diane then pretends to throw her keys, pushing the guy out of her way, getting into her vehicle, and started driving like a maniac towards the hospital. Now, Diane herself did sustain an injury. Her arm was grazed by one of the bullets fired by this bushy-haired stranger, but this was nothing compared to the injuries sustained by her three kids. 8-year-old Christy was shot twice in the chest and suffered from a massive stroke. Danny, the 3-year-old, was shot in the spine and was completely paralyzed. And sadly, Cheryl was pronounced dead on arrival, having been shot at point-blank range. Now, of course, people sympathized with Diane, It must have been heartbreaking to watch one kid die and see the other two in unstable and critical condition. But as the weeks went by, more and more people started to be suspicious of Diane Downs. She did a ton of interviews and even a reenactment of the events that took place that night. And she just couldn't keep her mouth shut. She loved the attention that she was getting, and instead of acting like a grief-stricken mother, she absolutely ate everything up and loved the limelight. Now, the general public as well as the authorities started to notice how her stories would change and how she would sometimes joke around, even during the reenactment of what took place that awful evening. Now, a witness also came out saying that he was driving behind Diane that night. And while she claims that she was driving like a lunatic in order to save her kids, this witness says otherwise, claiming that Diane was driving so slowly that he thought she was doing it on purpose just to piss him off. Now, hospital staff also reported seeing no emotion from Diane whatsoever. Once informed about Cheryl not making it, Diane reportedly seemed to have no emotion at all and not even shedding a single tear. She also seemed to be more concerned about how much blood there was on her new car. So this really seemed sketchy. She also seemed to be very shocked upon learning that Danny had been actually shot in the spine instead of the chest. Now, the hospital staff also noted that when they arrived in the hospital, Diane had a towel neatly wrapped around her gunshot wound, but the kids had no signs or forms of any first aid. Now, the police grew more and more suspicious of her every single day that passed. However, before they come to any conclusions, they of course had to dig for some more evidence. They asked Diane if she owned a handgun, which she denied, but Steve confirmed to the authorities that she actually did. And although the police were not able to find a handgun in Diane's home upon searching it, they did find a rifle and some bullets from a different gun that matched those found in the crime scene. So if Diane really did do this, what was her motive? What would drive a young mother to do such heinous crime to her innocent children? Now, during the same search of her apartment, police also found Diane's diary, where she wrote her most profound thoughts and deepest feelings. And there, they found a possible motive. It was then revealed that Diane started dating a co-worker named Robert and saw him as the ultimate love of her life. And although currently separated from his wife, Robert was still a married man. He described being with Diane as intense and decided to break things off with her and made it very clear that it was never going to work out between the two of them, as he did not like kids. And well, she had 3 of those. People who knew Diane from her teenage years described her as boy crazy, and as it turns out, she never really got out of that phase. So now the investigators had a possible motive, evidence from the bullets, and a few witnesses. But to lock this in, they needed something stronger. And Christy, as I have mentioned, did suffer from a massive stroke after having received 2 gunshot wounds to the chest. And because of this, she wasn't able to speak. However, medical staff from the hospital did inform the authorities about something odd happening when Diane visited her in the hospital. Now, according to the nurses that were there, Christy's vitals were very stable. However, her heart rate spiked up as soon as she saw her mother enter the room. And upon seeing this, the medical staff realized that Christy was very, very afraid of her mother. And police knew right away that Christy could be the key witness in solving this case. However, they needed to give her time to heal. Soon enough, Christy started to speak again, but was still severely traumatized. She then started seeing a child therapist who would tell her to write down her attacker's name on a piece of paper, then throw it into a fire and burn it. Christy did this for weeks before finally deciding to trust her therapist and showed her the piece of paper. And on this paper, she wrote, "My mom." On February 28, 1984, Diane Downs was arrested for the following charges: 1 count of murder, 2 counts of attempted murder, and criminal assault. Her trial started 3 months later on May, and once she entered the courtroom, everyone was shocked to see that Diane Downs was pregnant once again. During her trial, the song Hungry Like the Wolf was played in order to see what her reaction to this would be. And to everyone's surprise, she started vibing to it, bobbing her head and tapping her feet. And it seemed like she was having a great time when she should have had the opposite reaction. Audio recordings of her constantly changing her story during interviews and interrogations were also played, highlighting the inconsistencies in her many versions of events. But this did not seem to faze Diane at all, still claiming that she was innocent. She had so much confidence in herself and her made-up story until she saw the next witness, her very own daughter Christy, who gave a highly emotional testimony recalling that they were on their way home when Diane suddenly stopped the car, took something out of the trunk, before proceeding to open the passenger door. She then shoots Cheryl at point-blank range, then reaches out to shoot Danny, then turns to Christy last, shooting her twice. Christy also says that she watched her mother shoot herself in the arm and wrapped a towel on her self-sustained injury before driving real slow to the hospital. And although this was extremely traumatizing and devastating for an 8-year-old to relive, this witness testimony sealed Diane's fate because finally, Diane was finally found guilty on all of the charges pressed against her. She was then sentenced to life in prison, plus 50 years with the possibility of parole after 25. However, 10 days before even receiving the sentence, Diane Downs gave birth to a baby girl who was quickly taken away from her. Now, once in prison, Diane was diagnosed with narcissistic and antisocial disorders. During one of her interviews, Diane also mentioned that the reason why she got pregnant was because she missed her kids and that she was extremely lonely. According to her, you can't replace children, but you can replace the effect that they give you. Children are so easy to conceive. Not for everyone. And although Diane was finally in prison, the story doesn't end there because on July 1987, she actually escaped prison by climbing a 16-foot fence. And this caused a nationwide panic. People were scared that she might come and finish what she started and get revenge, especially on Christy, who testified against her. But luckily, she was found 11 days later at the house of her former cellmate's husband. After being retrieved, Diane Downs was transferred to a maximum security prison, being deemed as a highly dangerous inmate. In 2020, Diane had COVID but survived. She is now 67 years old and has been serving time for 38 years. She has been denied parole numerous times but is, up to this day, still claiming to be innocent. Now, on the brighter side of things, Danny and Christy are all grown up and are living happy, simple lives away from their mother and the media. Danny is said to be paralyzed from the waist down, while Christy has a permanent speech impediment because of the stroke that she suffered. However, these two kids still had a happy ending because they were actually taken in and adopted by one of the prosecutors and his wife. Now, the baby girl that Diane Downs gave birth to before she was sent to prison, she was actually adopted by a great family and she was renamed Rebecca. Now, Becky found herself in trouble herself when she found out about her biological mother, but thankfully she was able to recover from that, and she is also now doing very well and has kids of her own. And I guess that's where I'll end today's video. Thank you so much for tuning in. Should there be any other case that you would like for me to cover, please don't hesitate to leave a comment in the comment section below. Also, I would love to hear your thoughts on this case. So if you have something to say or anything to add, please comment down below. And thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all on my next video.